The comment section on iPad videos is always interesting. I still don't think this can be a laptop replacement. What I really want is a Mac version of a Surface Pro with the Apple Pencil. It has an M4 processor, a keyboard, and a trackpad. Why can't it run Mac apps? Zebra Coin is going to the moon. Telegram me to get in early. That last one might be spam. Everybody who wants the iPad to be more like a laptop has their own reasons, but for creatives, I think the main motivation is this. I have two devices that can do a lot of the same things. I could save a lot of money, time, and hassle if I could just buy one and do everything there. For me personally, on my laptop, I make videos, I design, I animate. On my iPad, I draw, I do a lot of writing and a little bit of animation, at least some of the animated roughs. And I end up bouncing around a lot. And as much as I'd like to use the iPad for everything, there's always been a lot of little things that are holding it back. Not insurmountable things, but just enough friction that I end up running back to my laptop for safety. iPadOS26 dropped earlier this week, and this might be Apple's biggest step forwards in making the iPad more laptop-like in years, maybe ever. So how is it? Is this the revolution we've been waiting for? No, not exactly. But hey, revolutions don't happen in a day. They can take years. Think of this as the first step. Apple throwing the T off the side of a boat. You're not free yet, but boy, is your laptop angry. Metaphors have never been my thing. First thing that greets you when you update to the new OS is this new liquid glass aesthetic. Some people here have referred to this design language as liquid. I have not. I find that term to be uncouth and unbecoming of a YouTube channel that regularly features screaming goat cartoons. I know! I also happen to visually think this looks kind of cool. Opinions vary there, but I love the little jelly stuff and animations and things like that. But when I upgraded, by default, everything looked pretty normal-ish. Obviously, you could see the new aesthetic a little bit here and there in some of the details. But if you want to get the full effect, long press on your home screen, go to edit at the upper left-hand corner, then click customize, and then you could go to town with a design and go full liquid glass with all clear icons. You can choose like a tinted color icons. You can make these dark. You can even bump up your icon sizes from here. Now, some of the valid criticism that I've heard is that people find it harder to read in some scenarios. It's just not as clear as to what you should do. Makes sense. Another thing that I have heard is that Apple should spend its time working on other things. Again, fair criticism, although if you are unhappy with Siri, the skill set that it takes to improve that is very different than the team that is working on the interface, so I'm not sure that moving designers over there would help, but anyway, I hear ya. I also had the unfortune of living through the transition from skeuomorphic design over to flat design. Gosh, that was what, like iOS 7? I think that was in 2013. It had many of the same interface problems that we're seeing here, there, and those are the kind of things that just get smoothed out over time and cleaned up. But what I really want to look at here are the changes that have come to the interface around, specifically around windowing. So before you start, jump over to the Settings app, scroll to multitasking and gestures, and make sure that you are on the Windows section. Otherwise, this isn't going to work. But once you're set up there, you can swipe down from the center top, and it brings up like a Mac type toolbar with little drop downs, and there's those three little icons here, that little traffic light icon. Tapping on that brings up our windowing options. I can close an app, I can shrink an app down, or I can window it up. Ta-da! Now this works pretty much the way you would expect it to work. You can move your windows around, you can resize them, you can even move them like off screen or at least partially off screen. Resizing these things is pretty easy. You can grab the lower corner, the lower right hand corner, and then just drag it around to change the size and the shape. And once you have some windows open, the gestures do some slightly different things. So if I pull up from the bottom just a little bit, it's going to give me like an expose type view where I can see all the Windows apps that I have. Swiping to the left shows me all my recently used apps. So if I want to pull one of those over, I can. And this is basically the quickest way to kind of jump through like your opened apps. Now, if I tap on my desktop, I guess it's called a home screen here, my windows will slide off to the side, and then I could just tap on one of those on the side to kind of bring it back to the center. In general, windowing works way better than I thought it would or originally thought it would. If you've ever used Stage Manager, you're going to see a lot of its DNA in here with the way things are resized and things like that. But what's a huge improvement here is the free-formedness of it. It really helps me feel like I'm in control of my workspace. That was the biggest thing with Stage Manager that really turned me off to it, is it just felt like it was trying to think for me, and I was like, stop it, get out of of my way, let me fiddle. And the goal of Stage Manager originally was to make this feel more like a desktop, and I could have my Files app floating over my programs, and now I can just drag something from Files into Procreate and it just imports it, and that was just so much easier than the old copy paste method or the share method or the open method, all that other stuff. It just felt so much better. It was just so much easier. Now, we talked about that little traffic signal icon, which lets us change into windowed mode. There is an easier way to do this. In any app that's open, you can just swipe up from the bottom right-hand corner of the screen and it will just start resizing. And dragging that quarter down to the quarter of the iPad again will just automatically make it full screen. And as I got into the flow of using this, I just stopped using the traffic lights completely and just used that to resize and move stuff around. One thing that I noticed is that this update makes the keyboard and mouse slash trackpad anyway, feel more like first-class citizens on the iPad. This is the first time I can think of where new iPad features are kind of easier to use with a trackpad or with a mouse. Like moving your cursor to the top of the screen brings up those drop-down menus on hover. One thing to note is I did use a mouse. I don't have a Magic Keyboard cover for my current iPad. And in general, the mouse isn't nearly as good as a trackpad for doing this sort of thing. The interface is still very gesture dependent. Since I was using a mouse, I couldn't do some of those things with my fingers to kind of move things around and navigate. So instead, I had to use the mouse a little bit and then reach up to the screen to do that sort of thing. There's some features in the File app that are just plain easier with keyboard shortcuts. Like the Files app now has like a little preview, so you can enlarge that image and see what it is. So if you tap and hold on that image or on that file, you can then choose Quick Look, or you just hit the space bar. And so I love that the keyboard is starting to make things easier, not harder. The Files app is improving here too, and this is actually a big update. I'm realizing as I typed out this script and I am saying it out loud, some of this sounds a little silly because many of the features that I'm going to talk about here are features that have been in desktop interfaces since like the 90s. But hey, this is about the iPad making it more desktop-like, so let's go. So the biggest thing for me is just being able to right-click on a file and choosing Open With. What? But before you had this super clunky share modal that popped up, it was always frustrating because it almost never showed you the app that you wanted to open this thing in. One thing I noticed throughout all of this is that even on the large 13-inch iPad Pro, everything feels big. The interface, the text, it all feels bigger than a desktop, so it felt a little bit claustrophobic. So I ended up plugging this into an external monitor for a while, and that is where I felt like this particular experience gets much, much better. That's when it started to feel like a desktop. And so as I was using this, the biggest things that I ran into and that I kind of found frustrating weren't necessarily iPadOS this time around, but with some of the apps that I was using. For example, I was using Google Docs. I was typing a lot in that, and it was just, it's not nearly as good as like Apple's writing app. Apple has its own apps for writing, but I'm so like built into the Google Doc ecosystem, and Google doesn't really care much about making their iPad apps better. Google didn't want me copying and pasting with the keyboard for some reason. It wasn't letting me select text easily. They just weren't updating their apps to work better on the iPad, specifically the way I wanted to use the iPad. So I've only been using this for 2 days, and in that time, some things are harder with a keyboard and mouse. Some things have gotten much easier. This feels like another step in the right direction, but not the destination. We have not arrived yet. And I've been using the iPad Pro for a lot of my boring businessy stuff, answering emails, writing the scripts, updating my website. And for that, it's working really, really well. I designed the thumbnail for this video in Affinity Photo. For me, the real test, and I have not done this yet, the real test is going to be editing a video. I'm juggling a lot of video files, I'm pulling in animation files, I'm pulling in image files, there's a lot that goes into making a video that requires a lot of files and moving between programs to get everything into the right place. And that's the area where the iPad kind of has struggled historically. I'm not gonna do that anytime soon. The main reason why is like, I know Premiere Pro like the back of my hand. I have a process. Final Cut, DaVinci Resolve, they're just too different, and I want to try those at some point. And so I just don't have time to spend a few extra days making a video just to try like a new program right now. We're like neck deep in tech season. So getting out videos is my main priority right now. But I think this might be a fun like follow-up project, maybe in the winter or in the spring when things are slow and I need a video idea here and there and I have some time to spend. So those are my first impressions. I don't think that this is a reason to buy a new iPad. Like if you are on a laptop and have wanted to use an iPad, don't run out and get an iPad now. I think it's a step in the right direction, but it's just one step. If you have an iPad, you should try it. You probably already have. You're probably watching this video on your iPad right now. But if you're using it, let me know your thoughts on this new interface, how it's working for you, what you found works, what you'd like to see improved down below in the comments. I'd love to hear it. But that's all I have for today. So take care, and I'll see you in a couple of days.